this guy in his book wrote about the case of a person, of a man who is going to be married in a few days. And he asked to God, okay, to get fine weather. And the day of the wedding, the weather is very, very sunny, very fine. Okay. Now, this guy who believes in God doesn't count the fact as a coincidence because he believes in God. It has a particular belief. So the guy thought, oh, God blessed me. I'm very lucky, but because God blessed me. Okay. A person who doesn't believe in God cannot say the same. Maybe for him, that fact is a coincidence.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I'm a psychiatrist. I study meaningful coincidences and try to understand what is a coincidence sometimes. How do you know when something should be called a coincidence? Things happen, like a dog might bark and you hear that, and then the pot boils over in your kitchen. Are the two related to each other? They happen around the same time, but is that a coincidence? And it depends on who's looking at it. And today we will have a philosophical look at coincidences with a remarkable woman who studies coincidences from a philosophical perspective. And so it's going to be fun talking to Alessandra. But meanwhile, you can order my book, Meaningful Coincidences. You can see it, the cover on the back of my shoulder. Please subscribe to this channel. It really helps tickle the algorithm, as well as if you like the show, that helps too. Your comments help. I like to be able to respond to your comments. So we're trying to get the idea of meaningful coincidences out into the general public mind. And this is one way you can help us do that.
Hi, Bernie.
Hi, Alessandra. I'm gonna tell people about you first while
Okay.
we're smiling at each other, and we're gonna do something about lightning striking in a little bit. Alessandra Melas collaborates with the University of Sassari in Italy, where she defended her PhD dissertation concerning causal realism in quantum mechanics. Causal realism in quantum mechanics. Her research mostly focuses on the history and metaphysics of science, with particular interest in causation and chance. With a particular interest in causation and chance, and these are central ideas to meaningful coincidences. She is currently working on metaphysics of coincidences. See, what are coincidences? A philosophical guide between science and common sense. It just came out. I think I know somebody who wrote an introduction or comment on this, like me, and thank you for sending it to me. She is a student in psychology and a teacher of high school level history and philosophy. She works on didactic methodologies along with scientific dissemination. Alessandra, great to see you again, and thanks for coming on the show with us.
Great to see you again, and hello to everybody. Thank you so much, Bernie, for inviting me to talk about the book you already showed, which
Let's put them. Now, is this a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, it is. Okay, so this book is written with Pietro Salis, a researcher who works at the University of Cagliari in Sardinia. And even Pietro is saying to you, thank you very much to give us this huge opportunity to talk about our point of view, philosophical point of view concerning coincidences. Because the guide question of the book is what are coincidences? And we try to give a metaphysical, philosophical response, moving between philosophy and common sense, and then from common sense to philosophy, presenting many examples to show our view, which is not totally a new one, because it comes from Hart and Honoré's conception of coincidences, who talked in 1959. The title of the book is Law in the Causation. No, sorry, Causation in Law. They say that coincidences are some kind of hybrid complex objects, metaphysically speaking, constituted by some ontic physical aspects plus epistemic and more psychological aspects. So we are
I think you for our audience, it's worth describing what you mean by ontic and what you mean by epistemic.
And yes, I will show you more precisely when I give you my coincidence story. But when we say ontic, we mean something which is physical, which is a property of the real, that exists independently in some sense of minds which are able to grasp this kind of objects. If I say that, for example, a coincidence is an ontic object, it means that it is a kind of physical object, and it doesn't mind if I'm able to see that object or I am not able, because it does exist independently on me, on my mind. When I say epistemic, I mean knowledge. And then we need some mind able to grasp some event that maybe we can call coincidental event. And also the degree of the knowledge is important. When we talk about psychological aspects, we think about something like expectations, knowledge, belief, and planification, surprise. So for example, when we say, oh, such a bad luck, oh, it's such a good luck, or wow, this is really shocking. Okay, we think when we talk about psychological aspects, we are talking something like that. Okay, on something like that. But let me give you my story concerning coincidences. It's a very personal one, because it's a story that my father told me when I was a very little child studying at the elementary school. And it's this story's fault, because I am still scared, very scared about storms, especially when they are very huge. Even though in Sardinia, when I live, we don't have so huge storms with many lightnings and so on. But I remember when I was in the USA, I was very scared about storms. Okay, here the story. When my dad was a very young boy, he found himself riding atop a donkey, which is a very common animal in the countryside in Sardinia, in the countryside on a stormy afternoon. And as clouds gathered overhead and lightnings crumbled ominously, something of very shocking was going to happen, because a bolt of lightning struck the ground exactly in front of the donkey, and startling the poor creature. The donkey stopped, and in its halt, my dad lost his balance and he tumbled to the ground. Such a coincidence, such also such a good luck, because both my dad and the donkey escaped the lightning's wrath, and completely unharmed. And I think this is the reason, because even my dad is still very scared about storms. And this is, of course, as I have already told you, the reason because I am so scared about lightnings in general. Of course, here we should say different things, which are quite important to say, because we consider this event as a coincidental event for many reasons. The first one is because here we have two intersecting causal lines in play. The line of the lightning, which is intersecting the other line, that is the line of the trajectory, I mean, of the donkey, okay, resulting in what we can call a coincidental event. But even though this is a necessary condition in order to get coincidence, this is not a sufficient one. Think, for example, about the fact that it is estimated that 6 million of lightnings strike the ground during the day in the world. 6 millions. But we don't consider this kind of intersection between the lightning and the ground as a coincidental one. Just because there are two intersecting causal chains, independent causal chains in play here. Because why? So the question we try to reply in our work is this one: why is there a difference in the interpretation of these two different kinds of strikes from lightnings? In the first case, we have in the donkey story, we have the intersection between the lightning, bolt of lightning, and the trajectory of the donkey. In the second story, we have just a lightning following, beating the ground in the middle of nowhere, where there are no people, where there are no damages, where no one can see it, and so on. So here the question is not so difficult. The answer, sorry, is not so difficult, I think, because in the first case, there is some kind of relevance, because so there was an intersection between a bolt of lightning and my dad, okay, and my dad's donkey. In the second case, nobody cares. Okay, no property of a friend of mine was damaged. No one has to fix the damage. No one who I know gets injured. And I think here we can immediately give a simple reason, because the first story about the donkey can be considered a coincidental one, and the second one, it is not a coincidental one. Okay, otherwise, every kind of causal physical intersection between independent trajectories or causal lines can be considered as a coincidence, such as the fact, for example, that next to my house there is a bakery. Okay, which is a kind of independent fact on the fact that I have bought this house in Alghero, okay, a very wonderful sea place in Sardinia. Okay. So what I am saying is that our view, our philosophical view, is different from the what we call the intersectionist view, ontic physical view of coincidences, which comes from Antoine Agustin Cournot and Jacques Monod, the Nobel Prize, who wrote the very popular book, Chance and Necessities. They both thought that coincidences were simply events which result from the intersection between independent physical causal chains. I've written a few articles about that, and I'm pretty sure that both they have the idea of coincidences such as physical phenomena, okay, which are out there without the necessity to the intervention of a mind, okay, able to see them. But we disagree with this point of view, and we think that there are more features in play here, metaphysically speaking, in order to understand what coincidences are. So coincidences, in order to get coincidences, we need the intersection between independent causal chains, a physical intersection, but it is not sufficient. We need epistemic access. We need a particular degree of epistemic access. We need psychological aspects, expectations of a certain kind. We need relevance, and we need also that what happens is not planned. So there is not any human contrivance in what is happening there when we have coincidences. Okay. I don't know if you have a question or some curiosity at this point of the discussion.
The, the to summarize from what I have just heard, if lightning strikes and nobody sees it,
Mm-hmm. There is no
it's
coincidence.
a coincidence requires an intersection of two events, often observed by another mind. So,
Yeah.
so we're watching your father and the donkey intersecting with the lightning, or he seeing it while it's happening. So there's a mind observing it. And it raises a similar question about if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it's that's
It's the
similar.
same.
It's the same.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I am saying something of very, very similar, almost the same. Okay, if
Oh,
nobody cares it, it doesn't exist because coincidences are not physical objects. They are much more complex objects.
and
They are
and that's
mixed.
that the point you're making is you can't have a coincidence unless it's observed.
Yeah, and at least it is observed, and it must be also very relevant for the people who are living or watching at that coincidences, at
And we
that
tend to we tend to
event.
mean by relevance, I think you also mean meaning that has
Meaning, yes, meaningful. Yeah,
but relevance is a good term because meaning gets used a lot. So is this coincidence relevant to me? The example of the dog barking and the the pot on the stove overflowing, there's no relevance to that coincidence. There's a relevance to the pot overflowing, boiling over, but not related to the dog. So there has to be a meaning to the intersection. So you can't have a coincidence unless there's some relevance to somebody, to a person.
Yes, yes, exactly like you say. Yeah, it's
Well, this question, as I've pondered it a bit, my question is, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And it depends on how you define sound. If there's no one to hear it,
yeah.
then it's not, there's not a sound. If we mean by sound, it's got to be heard, but it does put off sound waves,
Yeah, that's of
which
course.
which can be measured. So there is a difference to the tree falling in the forest and your father and the donkey, because there's somebody has to observe it. And the tree falling in the forest is similar in that way. It doesn't make a sound unless somebody observes it. So I think yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, but what you say is quite interesting because when we think about someone seeing the coincidences or seeing that event, we are not thinking about of some physical process that can be measured, okay, such as the sound you talked right now, okay, but it's the qualia, the quality of the perception of the person in play here, okay. And it's the same for sound in this case for the seeing, okay, for the sight. Okay, it's the when we say, let me see, perception of that event in some way, the perception, okay? For example, in the donkey story, we don't only need, in order to say that there is a coincidence here, that the intersection between independent causal lines, okay, causal chains, trajectories, events, something like that. But we need something more. We need epistemic access, a certain degree of epistemic access. So here we are, what you said is quite interesting because when you talked about sound, so we need to specify the degree of the sound, okay? So the degree of the perception. When we talk about epistemic access, we are talking about perception, okay, and then a particular degree of that perception.
Huh.
But this is not yet sufficient, so we need again something more, because we need that the fact is, for example, relevant, meaningful. In the example, in the story of the donkey, the story is quite meaningful, relevant for my dad, okay, and even for me, okay, because that is the reason, because I am still scared about storms. I'm seriously scared about storms, okay, and also the event is not expected. Okay, events like that are not so uncommon. Like, for example, David Hand in one of his books says, is that coincidences are not so uncommon or so improbable. They are likelihood events in some sense, because, for example, the fact that 6 millions of lightnings strike the ground every single day in the world proves that these kind of events are not so uncommon. What is uncommon here is the fact that that event happens to me or happens to a person who I know, okay? Because here there is the egocentric bias in play, as Magda Osman and Mark Johansen in their work show very well. If the event, an event which happens to me is much more important than an event which happens to other people, or especially to people who I don't know. Okay. And a lightning striking the property of my neighbor is a very bad luck. But if it happens to me, is a very, very, very bad luck. Okay. And what is really uncommon, to go back to what I was saying, is the fact that it's very improbable that that event happens to me and not to other people, or in the middle of nowhere, like the case of a lightning beating the ground where there are no people at all. Okay. And also in the Dan case story, what happened was very unplanned, because my dad didn't want to meet the bolt of the lightning, of course. And the bolt of the lightning didn't want to strike the ground in front of my dad's donkey. And as you can see, I have chosen this kind of example exactly because it shows, according to me, very well, all of the aspects which are so crucial to understand, metaphysically understand the coincidences. Okay. Now, a good question, a good reply to our view could be the following one. Do independent causal chains really exist? So we try to just to go more in depth when we think about the one of the conditions which are necessary, even though they are not, it is not sufficient to get coincidences. That is the intersection between independent causal chains. Do independent causal chains really exist? Because one may object that the two causal chains appear, for example, statistically independent because there is a common cause in their ancient past which screens off the two causal lines involved, making them independent. But we know that if two causal lines share a common cause, for example, in their past, they are not really independent. Okay, but of course, this kind of objection is not a new one, but it comes from a very popular philosopher of the Vienna Circle, Hans Reichenbach, who in his direction of time talked about common causes and screening off common causes. But we think, Pietro and I, we think that we can still talk about the independence between the causal lines, even though there is a common cause in the past of these causal lines. No one would say that me and you are relatives or cousins just because there was an ancient human being in common. For example, Lucy, the Australopithecus they found in North Africa, or maybe Christian literature, such as holy literature, says, for example, Adamo and Eva. So no one can say that me and you are relatives just because we are sharing a very ancient, we have in common a very ancient human being. Okay, like the first man in the history of the world. At the same way, no one would say that two causal lines are not independent because they share a very ancient common cause. So the common cause is so ancient that is not affecting the independence between the causal lines in play here. Okay. Moreover, we can say something more. So the common cause can explain why the line A is happening, that is the bolt of the lightning, and the line B is happening. That is my dad riding atop his donkey. Okay, but is not able to explain the intersection, the reason why these two lines are intersecting at a certain point and at a certain time. And it's not explaining why me and you or me and my dad have chosen exactly those two lines among and millions of causal lines. Okay, there is something more here in play. Okay, our point of view is that the common independent causal lines do really exist, or at least we can consider without any problems, without weakening our point of view, that causal chains are independent in some sense. Okay. So
Okay,
this replied to this
and
objection.
with that, uh, you raised a couple of questions for me. Uh, I interviewed someone recently who was an anthropologist studying DNA of people whose bones they would find.
Mm.
And she found someone who lived around where these bones she was talking about were found, and somehow showed him these bones, a variety of bones, and he picked two and said those two are important to me. And when they looked at his DNA and compared it to the DNA in those bones, they were they were similar. These were relatives of his from centuries ago, uh, who he somehow could identify as related to, as important, not related to him, but as important. So it appeared to be an independent causal chain, a guy coming from the village to examine bones and pick these two that looked independent, but it's a little like your Adam and Eve one. They did come from a common source. The two DNAs did. So what do you do about, how do you think about that one?
Okay, no, that's a good story, quite story, but it's also a story that I knew because a very similar one at least, because researchers nowadays are doing a very huge work concerning the DNA and the relations between the DNA of and also some illnesses of people that are very apart, very far away from each other in the world. But of course, here there is a common cause, which is the original DNA of the very ancient relative. But this common cause is still here. So here the common cause is the common cause of two different lines: the individual A and the individual B having this similar DNA or the same DNA, and maybe a similar illness. Okay, but this common cause is going to explain why both those two guys, those two individuals, have the same illness, but not going to explain why they maybe are going to have a drink together in a pub, or because or they are not going to explain a possible meeting.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. That's
It's a
good.
good, okay.
That's
It's
good. That's good.
describing. It's a good description, but it's not an explanation. Here is it's important to see the distinction between description and explanation. Explanation is a causal explanation.
That's
Okay.
that, that's
Did
that's
I
good.
did
So
I have
how
replied?
did how did this guy come to see the bones, and how did the people bring the
Yeah.
bones where this guy, the chains had to like come together somehow independently, even though he could identify them. How they come together becomes yet part of the part of the question. Yeah, that's a dissection that I wasn't doing right then, and you are.
Thank
I
you
have
very much.
I have another question that is related to your father and the donkey. Most of the time, people talk about meaningful coincidences as being positive. Here you
Hmm.
have an epistemic negative, where it's a scary thing. It's scary.
Yeah,
Enlightenment becomes scary for you.
it's not only a scary thing. It is a scary thing, but because we, before my dad, probably before having that incident, believed that it is very dangerous to encounter a bolt of lightning, probably. Okay, and we all think something like that, even though it's very fascinating because it's very spectacular. Okay, it's a very beautiful show to see the sky with lightnings and so on, but it's scared because it's scaring, sorry, because it's damaging. It's very dangerous. Okay, but this is the belief that my dad had before that incident, and even and also later, okay, and also after the incident. But what happened is not and was not told to me like a very bad story.
Ah,
My dad told me the story. He said he was very lucky because he escaped the boat of the line. Such a good luck. Okay, this is not so bad. It was such a good luck. This is not a negative. No, this is not a completely negative story. This one, I disagree with this point. Okay, but of course. The knowledge we have about, for example, the damages that can be caused by storms and lightnings. Also, social media and media have an important role here, because when you switch the TV on, you see every time some incidents or bad coincidences and something like that. So every time we are having the impression that we cannot control the power of nature. Right? So here we think that the psychological aspects in general are quite important, and there are more psychological aspects other than an expectation, surprise, and non-planification. Psychological aspects such as, for example, my personal fear, or my dad's fear in this case, the emotional impact. Also, the emotional impact is very important. And yeah, especially the emotional impact.
yeah,
Especially the emotional impact is
yeah.
important here, okay? And so we have the intention to continue a story that we wrote in our book in order to analyze more psychological aspects in play when we talk about coincidences, such as emotions and fear and beliefs in general. For instance, think this example, which is not mine. It's a David Owen example. This guy in his book wrote about the case of a person, of a man who is going to be married in a few days. And he asked to God, okay, to get fine weather. And the day of the wedding, the weather is very, very sunny, very fine. Okay. Now, this guy who believes in God doesn't count the fact as a coincidence because he believes in God. It has a particular belief. What if I don't believe in God? And I'm not able to explain, nor causally, nor using God this fact, then I think this is a coincidence. Okay, bless you. Okay, and so the guy thought, oh, God blessed me. I'm very lucky, but because God blessed me. Okay, a person who doesn't believe in God cannot say the same. Maybe for him, that fact is a coincidence. Okay, so this is
There's a funny thing that just happened, Alessandra. You said, "Bless you," as
yeah.
I was about to sneeze, or I was sneezing. I turned the mute on, and then you were able to say what the guy said was, "God blessed me." So
But it was I did it not by chance. I did it just to combine the two things. It
to
was
define
not by
my to
chance.
define
Yeah,
my sneeze. Okay,
yeah,
so there.
yeah. It was a joke for you.
Well,
When you sneeze, yeah, I said bless you, and I said at the same, almost at the same time, few seconds later, that the guy thought to be blessed by God, just to, in order to, just to make you saying that it was a funny story. Okay, it
Yeah,
was a
and,
joke.
and we created a funny story
It
here that
was not a
isn't.
coincidence. It
It's
was
not a
not.
coincidence because you
Absolutely not. Yeah, I
intentionally
intended. Yeah,
said
intentionally did it.
yes,
Okay.
yes, and when you were talking about turning on the TV set and you see nature you can't control, you started to imply that coincidences are a regular occurrence in people's lives.
Uh, can you repeat it again? I'm not
Yes,
sure I
yeah, people
properly
turn on
understand.
the TV set,
Yeah, yeah.
and you were suggesting that that confirms the idea that nature is not controllable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that if I have that thought in me, which a lot of people do, that nature thing reinforces that the TV, you can't control the nature, reinforces the belief that nature is powerful and perhaps scary. And that's a coincidence that we, from your definition, I think it is, unless the person is turning on the TV set
Yeah.
to watch a lot of storms, so they'll be
Yeah.
scared. I mean, so you have to look. So you keep talking about the intention of the what, like you just did, the intention of bless God blessed him. You had an intention there, but you're not going to find out the intention. You just see the overlap. So you have
Yeah.
to find out the
The
person's
X
in.
shape of the coincidences. Yeah, but it's like the case that the situation which happens today. When I switched my laptop on, okay, it started to to be very cloud, and it started to be very lightning also. So here there is a storm, okay, and now I am talking about a storm. I have talked about a storm story, so I think it's because so here it is important. It's important to see that the coincidences cannot exist without the meaningfulness. So it is, I think, necessary to precise that when we say relevant, we are not saying exactly the same thing when we mean meaningfulness, meaning, because with meaning we also mean the content of something, like in the example of the Jung's scarabeo, it's the beetle, okay. I don't know the name in English of that insect exactly. In Jung, the psychoanalyst,
Beetle. Beetle.
beetle, okay, beetle, that's right, is talking with a person about a dream, and the content of the dream has the meaning of a beetle, and in the window, exactly at the same time, there is in the window of the office, of Jung's office, there is something very similar, not the same, of a beetle. I think so. Here, when we say that there must be some meaning in common between the two intersecting causal lines, or maybe some content which is very similar. Okay, the content must not only be relevant, but sometime meaning is very important, especially in the cases where the intersection between the two independent causal lines is not at the same point and at the same time, but the causal lines or intersect in time and not in space, or intersect in space and not in time. Then it is important that the content of the two causal lines have some meaning in common. I gave you in another interview, and also in the book is written, an example concerning the Dr. Zhivago and Boris Pasternak. And this is a real story. So I was reading Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak, and my friend who lives in Germany, a very good friend, was watching a documentary on Boris Pasternak on TV at the same time in two different places. Few minutes later, I called by phone air, and she told me, "Oh, sorry, I didn't reply to your first call because I was watching a TV program on Boris Pasternak." And they said, "I was reading Dr. Zhivago." Okay, and look, in this example, we have two independent causal lines which are intersecting, not in space, but in time. It means that my friend is in Germany. I am in Italy, in Sardinia, which is not exactly Italy because it's an island and it's enough far away. So we needed to take a plane or a boat for hours to reach the continent. Okay, but so the two causal lines are, the first one is my friend reading Dr. Zhivago, no, me reading, sorry, Dr. Zhivago, and my friend watching a TV program on Boris Pasternak at the same time, okay? But what makes this event a coincidental one is the meaning of what we were doing, Okay. And I think it's the same when we switched the TV on and we were thinking about an incident and we watched the TV and the TV are talking about, in a TV program, are talking about some very similar incident. Or, and you see such a coincidence. Okay. Because it's the content in the meaning of the event that is very important here. Okay. And that's all. I think
The
uh,
the content is part of the content. I
part of the
call it
meaning.
the semantic meaning. But it's like the a beetle in the Jung story, similar.
Mm,
Here, Dr. Zhivago was the semantic, the name was similar. But you also mentioned the importance of the emotional
yeah.
response that you have, and you also bring up how well, what about the emotional response?
Yeah. No, I thought there was some kind of a telepathy between me and my friend. So when it happened, I thought, wow, so we are really in communication with each other. Emotionally, I felt a little bit shocked about that. At the beginning, I thought, oh, it's a coincidence. Something like that happens every day. But okay, but it's a coincidence, but it's a very, very interesting coincidence because I felt like there was some kind of mind which decided that today that we should meet in some way. So it was yeah, it was a little bit not shocked, maybe saying shocked is too much, but a little bit shocked. I was, yeah.
Uh, the
Impressed,
the
impressed.
the you talk about two meanings, I think, the semantic, the Dr. Zhivago, and the shock, kind of, not quite. But you also referred to two other meanings. One is that it made you feel closer to
Yeah,
her,
yeah,
uh, and that you two are sharing something. And then
yeah,
you came up with an explanation, which to me is the fourth meaning in meaningful coincidences, which was telepathy. That you were you so that to me there are four different meanings, and in the semantic, the emotional, the what it does to your life story. I'm connected with her, and what it instigates in you as an explanation. Those
yeah.
are those are four meanings. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I see it. So, of course, the fact that we are friends, very good friends, implies some interpretation of that fact. Because, first of all, so my question was why we both choose not to do something which is related to Boris Pasternak, okay, but why we choose to tell that, okay, probably because we know that we both love Boris Pasternak, and because we know we are friends and we think we are really in a kind of telepathy. Okay, so this is a prejudice, a bias in some sense, which influences the choice of the story. Okay, if we weren't good friends, probably for us it wouldn't have been so impressive. The fact that we both were doing something which concerns Boris Pasternak, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see your
yeah.
point. That's a good. Yeah. That's a
It
good
it
point.
reinforces a belief that you both
Yeah,
have.
yeah, exactly,
Uh,
exactly.
and then you get to go to what I like to go to as explanations, and telepathy is an explanation. But yeah, going back to some of what you were saying early, Alessandra, was you have to also look at what brought the two of you to in contact, because
Mm,
you could have been, this happens probably, you see what I'm going for. You could have been watching and reading at the same time, but not knowing, but something made you communicate with each other. That made the coincidence happen.
yeah, of course. So friendship can be considered as a common cause about the fact that we called continue keep calling each other, keep
Yeah, yeah.
touch
So
each other. But this common cause, the fact that our friendship can explain why I like Boris Pasternak and she also likes Boris Pasternak, but it doesn't still it doesn't explain why I was doing that exactly at the same time she was doing something very similar. Okay.
it still doesn't explain how come you were communicating with each
Yeah,
other
yeah,
while
yeah.
she was watching
You're right.
the
Yeah.
documentary.
Yeah.
Isn't that one of your main points here? Is
Yeah, yeah, it
I,
is. It is. I agree with you. Yeah, that's, yeah. I think we should go in depth, more in depth, in analyzing these aspects. Okay.
it's yeah, that's what you've brought to me today. That's why I first bring this back to you when they talk about the DNA. How'd the guy get in front of the
Yeah.
bones? You raise that question. It's the same question. How did you and she make contact with each other at that time that one of you was watching the documentary? She was watching the documentary. You were reading, that was easier. That was a broader time frame, but watching the documentary is a smaller time frame. So this was
Yeah.
the unlikely part of it, that you called at the time she was watching I guess you called her.
Yeah, but yeah, I called her and she was still watching the documentary.
Oh, she was not still. Okay.
Yeah, no, she was, she
She
was.
was. She
Yeah,
was.
she was, and she said to me, "Oh, Alessandra, sorry, probably I lost your first call because I am watching a TV program on Boris
So
Pasternak."
that's the question.
So,
Why did you call at that moment? And that's where the telepathy comes in. I think
yeah,
this morning just I was just like lying in bed. It was early for me, 6:45 our time, and I thought of this friend of mine and thought of her with her cat. It just came into my mind. And
yeah.
then at that moment I hear the phone click for a message, a text message.
That's interesting because we consider exactly the same time, but it is not exactly the same time.
It's not
we
exactly.
want we want to interpret that time as exactly the same time because we are trying to find always some causal, not coincidental, some causal interpretation of these events that we are not able to explain and then we call coincidences, but we are, it's a missing of explanation. We try to find a causal explanation, and then we want to see that the time is the same as a sign of something more, some of more huge, which you are not able to understand. Okay, and so here our view is very similar to Magda Osman and Mark Johansen view because they say it very well in their works. They say that coincidences in some sense come from the intention of the human beings to explain causally what happens, but they are not able, and then they say, oh, okay, it's a coincidence. And that's also the reason, because every time we are trying to see the cross, the intersection between causal chains, even I think there are not intersection at all, because the intersection so what I am trying to say to you, that in some sense we in this book we have considered physical intersection to simplify in some sense our overview, okay, because in only one book it's impossible to explore all of the kinds of coincidences, synchronicity, and things which consider intersection in a different way, intersection only in time or intersection only in space, okay, and not both in space and time, okay.
And there are more variations as well, but we need to be able to wrap up this lovely conversation now. It's getting to be
Okay.
about time. So is there one last thing that you would like to leave our audience with besides creating the coincidence of the books, so they can see what's the title of this book?
What are coincidences? Okay.
What are coincidences? What a
Yeah,
question. What are coincidences?
such a
And
huge question.
it's a huge problem, and look how
Yeah.
thin the book is. But
The
it's
book
dense.
is not so huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the writing is dense. You got to like really
Yeah,
pay
that's
attention
true.
to it.
That's true. Yeah.
It's philosopher writing. So what would you like to leave our audience with?
Um, yeah, I don't know. So I hope the audience now has a more clear view of the of coincidences. I hope that. Um, I would like to get examples of coincidences. I really love to listen to examples from people talking about what they think were coincidental events, for example, which happens to them, happen to them. I have to say thank you also to my students, because this book was possible um, thanks to them, because all of the time they were asking me, teacher, what are coincidences? What do you think? I don't know, but listen to this fact. One day I was writing a lecture to a person, and at the same time, this person wrote me a message on WhatsApp. Okay, so and every single time they are telling me amazing stories, and so I really love to have to listen to story from people who will be watching uh,
So
this interview.
do you want people to write to you their coincidence
Yeah,
stories?
yeah, 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 yeah. Write me, please.
Well, okay, you heard that, ladies and
Much
gentlemen.
probably. It's too
Just
much, too much
well,
probably.
we'll see what happens. So anyway, I'm gonna end, but we'll end the recording. So thank you very much, Alessandra. It's been always a delight talking with you. It's been great. So thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Thank you.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.